pour la fête?
It's weirder than candy.
Mr. Jones in the house, y'all.
SSX is a snowboarding game that was developed by EA Canada, published by EA Sports Big and released on the PS2 in October of 2000. Kicking off what would become a long-running and beloved franchise, SSX bulked up the PlayStation 2's launch lineup and was arguably the most well-received of launch titles for Sony's second console. There are some games that don't need much of an introduction, and to be honest, SSX is certainly one of them. If you owned a PS2, Xbox or GameCube back in the day, there is a pretty strong chance that you have played a game from this series. If you haven't played an SSX game and you're wondering what it is, well, it's basically a snowboarding game that feels like the people who made it decided to forsake all elements of reality and replace them with fun. In some ways, this game does feel a lot like a launch title. There isn't an abundance of content and the presentation is a little plain, but what is here is still worth diving into. You can either take part in individual events or you can attempt to work through the career mode where you can unlock more tracks and characters. You'll be able to compete in races in which you'll have to place third or higher to progress, and there are also the show-off events where you aim to achieve the highest trick score possible. Both event types are enjoyable, and although there can be some rough difficulty spikes here and there, it's such a good time that you keep retrying and pushing forward. So, full disclosure, I suck at this game. You may have already noticed that from the footage I've used for this review, but I think it says a lot about a game when I feel like I'm constantly bumping into things, constantly falling over and constantly failing at attempts to be stylish, but still having a really good time. SSX can be a little finicky to control at first, but you will adjust after a few races as you learn to slow down and make precise movements in some of the tight turns, and also learn when to build up speed by leaning forward, which restricts your movement but will help you get that much needed airtime for a jump. Speaking of airtime, when you are defying gravity, you can perform an extensive number of tricks that are all tied to one of the 4 shoulder buttons. You are rewarded for keeping things varied and combining multiple tricks into a single jump, not only with your score but also with boost, which is incredibly valuable, especially in the races. All of the mechanics in play here are quite simple, which is good. It doesn't require you to do complex combinations and twist your fingers around each other. Instead, the challenge comes from the tracks. While the early races are wide and open, the further into the game you get, the more narrow your route becomes, and more importance is placed on your ability to weave through turns and obstacles. Luckily, as you win more events with your chosen character, you will not only unlock more outfits, but also new boards which come with a bit of a stat boost to your speed and stability. Sometimes SSX does feel a bit harsh, but with the tracks being as crazy as they are, it's hard to get too frustrated at the idea of making some of the ridiculous jumps within them for a second or third time. I think the tracks are the real star of the show here. It's sort of what we'd come to expect from a EA Sports Big title, but the colourful and over-the-top design to the world gives everything that bit of character that made these games so memorable. It also helps that considering this is a PS2 launch title from the year 2000, the visuals overall have held up better than I expected. Normally when you return to a game almost 20 years later, you come across some elements that don't look as great as you remember, but I think because SSX isn't really trying to achieve any level of photorealism, it doesn't appear dated like other games from this era. The EA Sports Big style is baked into every element of the game, including the still pretty good looking character models, which all come with the very recognisable early 2000s fashion sense and attitude. Some of the effects such as snow and lighting could be better, but as it's a launch title, it's easy to overlook. Audio wise, there isn't a lot to talk about. There are bits and pieces of voice work from the characters which are mainly one-liners shouted while in mid-air, but not enough to critique. The same could be said about the sound effects of the game in general, as scraping through snow or crashing into a tree is about on par for this period, but nothing noteworthy. Later titles in this franchise would feature some excellent soundtracks with licensed music, however the first outing for the series is a little more bland, not bad by any means, but slightly repetitive. As mentioned earlier, SSX isn't really a game that needs much of an introduction. It's SSX, we've all played it or at the very least heard of it, and you most likely know if it's your type of game or not. Its crazy and creative style is really just a mask to hide what is actually a challenging game that shouldn't be taken lightly. Success in this game won't come as easy as you may think, but the simplicity of its controls make it enticing enough to master. This is a game worth playing just to see its amazing tracks and unbelievable tricks, and while there isn't a massive amount of content, there is a tremendous amount of fun to be had playing solo or with a friend.